Hello and welcome again as we continue to work our way through topics 5.1 and 5.2 for IB Biology. We are once again focused on the applications, and so far we've looked at the study of the finches of Daphne major, we've looked at antibiotic resistance in bacteria, and we've even gone outside of the IB Biology guide and looked at examples of the iguanas of Bernardima on the Galapagos Islands. But today we focus on this particular application: development of melanistic insects in polluted areas. Well, first of all, let's get started with you guys giving me the answer in your Google Hangouts for what is meant by the term melanistic insects. Feel free to go look it up wherever and let me know that you're present by typing your answer in the chat for what's meant by melanistic insects. Okay, so we've all shared our answers. Now, today we focus on the peppered moth, Biston vitellaria, and the ladybug, Adelia bipunctata. Because I'm writing by hand, I have the first name, the genus name capitalized, the species name with lowercase, and both are underlined because I don't have the option to write in italics. That, of course, related to topic 5.3. Now, we're focusing on these two specific examples to look at the topic of melanistic insects, both relating to insects. The first one is a classic experiment, the peppered moth, documented in biology books over the last half a century and more. And the thing about it is, because it's such a classic and easy to follow example, it has been subject to great scrutiny by those who are very skeptical about descent with modification and evolution by natural selection. And the question has come about: how valid was this experiment conducted by a scientist known as Kettlewell to collect the actual evidence to demonstrate selection of the melanic moths versus the non-melanic moths in places that were impacted by industrial pollution? So this entire topic has also been dubbed or termed industrial melanism in insects. So where is the evidence to support this? And one of the classic experiments conducted by a researcher named Kettlewell has been subject to great scrutiny. But first up, what I want you guys to do is to refer to these two examples and explain how they provide evidence for natural selection or descent with modification. I don't want you to just do it off the top of your head by drawing a few sketches. I do want you to go cite some sources and use some images. So I want you to prepare a document and state your sources. Now, Wikipedia, it's a place where you can get great information. Absolutely, 100% sure about that with respect to this topic, because I've checked it. But you can't cite Wikipedia. What you do is, when you go into Wikipedia and you see the little numbers next to each bit of information, click on those numbers and they will take you to the original source, which is likely to be some valid scientific source that you can then cite and talk to me about the peppered moth and the ladybug and explain to me in your document how they provide evidence to support natural selection. Now, this doesn't have to be very long. I'm looking for more images and a few annotations and paragraphs so that you could take care of each one in about 20 minutes of search and work. So that will be something that you could comfortably complete in your 90-minute block today. Now, going beyond this activity, I want you to also consider a few additional pieces of information. I want you to go read up about Kettlewell's experiment and to find some information as to why people have said it's flawed. And I don't want that information to be from a weak source. I want it to be from someplace like an accepted journal, like the journal Nature, or some recognized website which you will cite. And you will talk to me about Kettlewell's experiment and why it has been cited as being a flawed experiment. What's the evidence out there for people to make that claim that Kettlewell's experiment was fabricated and flawed in some way? And then I want you to consider this from the ToK perspective. Not because those two things show up together in lots of places, that we should automatically assume that that correlation implies a causation. There might be other reasons why the moth is becoming melanic in places that are subject to industrial pollution. So therefore, bear that in mind. Correlation does not mean causation. And of course, with that in mind, it's valid to question any experiment and to look at where is the evidence to say that the peppered moth or the ladybug provides evidence for natural selection. So I want you again to cite your source where you get that information about the flaws in Kettlewell's experiment, and then from your theory of knowledge perspective, I want you to consider other real-life situations, like this one here that I'm presenting. It's a real-life situation. And I want you to consider some other real-life situations that are similar to this one, where a scientific experiment, a famous one, would have been questioned. And another such example is the work of Gregor Mendel, where there is a claim, if you type it into Google and you do some search, you would find that there are claims out there that the great Gregor Mendel, the father of genetics, the man who gave us the understanding of dominant and recessive and gene and allele and the whole science of inheritance, his work was also falsified according to some sources. So I want you to search for evidence concerning that. Not to say that Kettlewell's experiment was flawed or Gregor Mendel falsified his data. Those are things that are continuously open to question. What is true, though, that there is a correlation between the presence of the melanic moth and industrial pollution. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this is a great example of natural selection. In the case of Gregor Mendel, all of his findings and all of his hypotheses have proven to be correct. So therefore, the question arises from this real-life situation is, can the end ever justify the means? Could it be that if you're a scientist and you are confident about a particular outcome, that it's okay then to fabricate or to change your data so that you convince everyone else of what you're trying to prove? Can the end ever justify the means in science or any other area of knowledge for that matter? That is an example for you of how you go from a real-life situation to this very general type of knowledge question in ToK. But if you're particularly interested in this topic and you are thinking about your extended essay in biology using secondary research, well then this too is an excellent topic, because what makes for a good extended essay is something where you have an analysis to do, where there are different perspectives to gather information on. And this development of melanistic insects in polluted areas is one great example. Because you can go beyond these two examples, you can search the literature for more examples of melanism, and of course you can expand a little bit more on the criticisms of the original experiment as conducted by Kettlewell. And that is for you to consider for your extended essay. But now I would like you to spend the rest of this class working specifically on this part of the activity, and these areas are for consideration outside of biology, related to the two other core areas of the diploma, ToK and the extended essay.